Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from January 7th, 2022. So we have finally jumped into this year on our look back. And I'm recording this a little earlier this week, recording this on July 5th. So on Tuesday, this won't come out to the 9th. So life means I need to record this one early this week. So maybe things change between now and when you watch this, but most likely not. I give those dates though because things are always changing in the comic market. So just want to give you guys a chance to know when this information was most relevant. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week we got 18 books between the two lists. So let's see if we can learn what factors made these books hot, what's affected them since, so that we all make a little better decisions. We're chasing those hot books of the moment. First up, we got Timeless #1. This is the Miss Minutes cover. This was on the list last week when we talked about it, and really no real difference in price here. This is one of those that, well, it didn't switch lists. It was on both lists, but just continued to sell really hot. $35, $50 for this one back then. Now it's a $20 to $40 book. 9.8 only costs you $80 to $100. So this one is down and definitely an I'll be back. Not the trap I thought it might be, just because Miss Minutes isn't actually in the book. She's just on the cover. And I didn't know how much interest would continue in her this far away from the Loki show. But so far there's been pretty good interest. It is down, but would have been worth waiting on. But still carrying quite a bit of value. So next we have Department of Truth #14, the David Sanchez Tupac variant. Back then this was going for $150 plus for raw copies of this. And I thought this might be an I'll be back. It was limited to 500 copies, but still didn't know how much interest there would be. But apparently there's been very sustained interest. Right now it's a $125 to $200 book. So I'm calling this kind of steady and worth it. It's still in that 150-ish range for the most part. So yeah, this one's done pretty well. It's held its own at least. So you didn't really overpay if you paid for what it was back then. Our last just cover of the week is Morbius, the Living Vampire #1. This is the Scotty Young variant from the 2013 series. And yeah, this is just a really hard to find Young variant. Back then, raw copies had jumped all the way up to $85. The movie was causing buzz for all kinds of Morbius variants is what was going on here. And now that movie tanked, of course, but this book hasn't really tanked, but it has backed up. It's now like $50 to $80 for this cover. So yeah, another I'll be back. Another book that would have just been good to be patient on as you got away from kind of the movie hype. And boy, the hype for that movie was not deserved. So, with that, we're going to move into comic buzz, and we actually have a lot of comic buzz kind of stuff. Although I don't know how much you want to call this one buzz or just character or whatever, but this is Vampirella 113, the hard to find final issue of the original Harris run. Back then, 9.6 hit an all-time high at $2,000, and 9.0 hit an all-time high at $550. Now it's a $300 to $600 book raw. I couldn't find any really recent high grade sales. The highest grade sale I could find was an 8.0 at $330, but if an 8.0 is at $330, $550 for a 9.0 is probably pretty close to what the range would still be. So I'm going to say this has kind of been steady and worth it. It looked what sales I could find for comparable grades over this time period. Just not a lot of high grade copies out there. It is hard to find, and it's definitely hard to find at a high grade. So yeah, so this one is kind of just, I'm going to call it steady, even though I didn't have any direct comparisons between sales back then and this at the same grade. Next, we're going to move into Omega the Unknown, #1. This is the first appearance of Omega the Unknown, who is James Michael Starling. And basically, this character has been reintroduced after about a decade being absent in Darkhold the Omega #1 or something. So there was a book, they reintroduced this character and caused a bunch of people to chase this first appearance. Back then it was going for $50 on average. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. This one turned into an absolute dumpster fire. I don't think they've actually necessarily done anything with this character. It was not a super popular character previously before he disappeared. Wasn't sure why anybody was willing to pay $50 for this, but yeah, this one definitely turned into a dumpster fire if you chased Omega the Unknown, because they were bringing him back. Next, we have Taskmaster number 3. This is the first appearance of Taguchi? Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but in the Tiger division, there was a huge increase in sales, but the value really didn't jump that much back then. This is another one of those Tom books. Raw copies were going for $30. 9.8 was going for $130 as people were kind of specking on this, and then there was a book where the Tiger division was being used. Now it's a $5 to $30 book raw. 9.8 will cost you $80 to $100. So another classic. I'll be back. No real news related to this character, not really being used that much. So this book is backed up. Out of sight, out of mind. Prices kind of decrease. Next, we're going to move on to Thor number 20, the first appearance of the God of Hammers. So another Kate spec. Kate's introduced a character, so let's all go out and try to get it. That hasn't always paid off. Back then, this one didn't go completely crazy like some of his introductions have. It was only doing $20, $25. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. 9.8 will only cost you $40 to $60. So yeah, this one hasn't amounted to much yet. We'll see. Cates is still working on Thor, so maybe he'll bring this back and make it more important, but so far it hasn't amounted to much, and this one definitely turned into a trap if you were chasing it right out the gate, because most of the sales are 5 to 10, even though there are a couple sales up around 20. So yeah, definitely has turned into a trap. Our other comic buzz was Mighty Thor number 12, kind of related to the same thing, and this is the origin of Mjolnir. So the God of Hammers was like inside of it. So this is the story about how the hammer was formed. Raw copies back then were $10 to $15 related to the same storyline. Now it's a $5 to $10 book. So this one's only an I'll be back because really didn't have that far to drop. 9.8 on this one's about $50, so about the same price as that Thor 20. So yeah, Origin of Mjolnir kind of cool, but hasn't really amounted to much long-term value, at least not yet. With that, our last comic buzz book of the week is Swamp Thing, The Green Hell, which is just, everybody was talking about it as being a good read by Lemire. I didn't read this one. I heard, actually, later heard some mixed reviews on this, but it was only going for $7, which was cover, but basically there was a 500% increase in sales, so that's why this is one of those that they put on the list, because a bunch of people were buying it even though it really wasn't going for much, and it's still $5 to $10 book, so basically a cover price book. So I guess you could call it steady and I'll be back, but because yeah, you can still get it for right at cover, so, or maybe even less occasionally, but yeah, so not much has come out of this particular run. All right, with that, we're going to move into one DC movie before we move into Marvel or Disney related stuff. First up, we have DC, Infinite Crisis number 3. First appearance of Jaime Reyes. The Jim Lee variant was the one that hit the list. So this was basically news around the Blue Beetle movie. A couple weeks back, we had Infinite Crisis number 5, which is his first appearance as Blue Beetle on here. This one was going for $20 back then, 9.8 going for $100, based on news that they were actually going to make it a movie and not a series. Now, raw copy cost you $10 to $20. 9.8 is actually, you could say it's up. The most recent sale went for $200, but it's only one sale in the last couple of months that I could find. So, kind of not really going to count that. We're going to focus on the one sale. You can always get an outlier. We're going to focus on what the vast majority of the raw copies are selling for, and that's a down and an I'll be back. So another book that's backed up. Hasn't been much news related to this movie lately, so that is why this book is down just a little bit. All right, with that, we're going to move into Sony Spider-Verse type stuff. And this is still kind of the follow-up related to the little buzz that we got from the little release of Across the Spider-Verse, that little trailer. And this is Ultimate Fallout 4, first appearance of Miles. On the list again. This has been on the list a million times over the 3+ years I've been doing this. Back then, 9.8s were all the way up to 33 to 3,500, which was not all-time high yet, but getting close. Now Now a 9.8 will cost you 23 to 2,800. So this one has backed up quite a bit. Just as the market has slowed on everything. And Miles has been a little bit of a roller coaster when there's buzz or not buzz. But 23 to 2,800 is really good prices for this, but just down from those peaks. Raw copy, it costs you 5 to 1,200 depending on condition, that kind of thing. So this is a down, and I'll be back over the last 6 months. Obviously, Miles is straight cash long term, but want to try to buy it during one of these lulls if you don't have it yet, as opposed to when there's news. So next we have Miles Morales number 8, the first appearance of Assessor. Raw copies were going for $30 back then, and based on this, maybe this might be a key collector had put this out. That maybe this is a villain they would use. Seems like a weird choice, but it caused a 400% increase in sales. Like I said, it was up to $30. The 9.8 went for $185, and I expected this to kind of be a trap, but it hasn't been so far. It's still a $30 to $45 book raw. 9.8 going for $130 to $200, so pretty much right in the same range. 9.8s have been steady, kind of. I'll be back to worth it, but the raw copies, which is the most of the sales, are actually up a little bit. So we're going with up and worth it on this. I'm very surprised that people are spending this much on this particular villain, but so far they seem to be getting their money out of it. We'll see if this continues or not. Seems like an odd villain choice, especially since we know the Spot's going to be playing a big role. Yeah, I'm not sure where people think this is going to fit, but so far they're willing to pay it. I think maybe part of it is just this cover. I'm going to flash the cover back up real quick, but yeah, I think maybe it's the cover, because to me that seems more logical to go after than the Assessor, but we'll see. Next we have Spider-Verse number 6, and this is the book that has a ton of first appearances of Spider characters, none of which I could name off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of them in here. And there's reports there are going to be like 120 different Spider versions or something in these movies. So people are specking on this book. Back then they were paying $125 plus raw, and I thought this was crazy. I stand by, I think it's crazy, because nobody can name these guys really. They haven't been used in anything else yet. They show up for 30 seconds in a Spider-Verse movie. Is it really worth $125 plus? Well, so far, yes. The market continues to support this book. I know it's not a high print, but raw copies now cost you $150 to $200. 9.8s are going for $1,700 to $1,800. For reference, that's basically what the first Spider-Gwen will get you. Edge of Spider-Verse 2 is basically a $1,700, $1,800 book. NYX3 and a 9.8 is basically a $1,700, $1,800 book. And none of these characters have done anything close to that, but there's a bunch of them, so people are paying big money for this book. This is our up and straight cash book this week. I'm still kind of flabbergasted, but it's doing it, and so far the market is supporting this book, so we'll see what happens long term. But so far I have been wrong. I really didn't think this would hold, but it has, and actually continued to go up. Next, we're going to move into more MCU related. And first up is Hulk 156, the first appearance of Kyrlar, Kyrlar. And this was rumors that Bill Murray was going to appear maybe in the Ant-Man movie as this character or something. Raw copies were going for $120 back then. Now it's a $15 to $50 book. This turned into a dumpster fire. There's been no news about this character. Nothing to back this up that this is true or going to happen. And we're still a ways from Quantumania. Yeah, book is crashed and burned and was definitely not good spec at 120. Maybe there was some truth to it, and if you get it for 15, okay, that's probably pretty good spec. But 120 was not the time to buy this book. Next, we have The Order, number 8, the first appearance of Ezekiel Stane, who is the son of the villain from the first Iron Man movie. I forget what his first name is. But anyway, this character was introduced in comics here. Raw copies of this were going for $30 based on rumors that he would be the part of the villain in Ironheart and or Armor Wars, so that this character was going to be used as the villain, as the son of Jeff Bridges' character from the first Iron Man movie. Now it's a $10 to $25 book. Turned into a bit of I called it a trap because most of the sales are 10 to 15. There are a couple of sales that are still pushing 2025. But this has basically been cut in half for what you could pay for it. So yeah, if you think this is real, then now might be a time to go see if you can find one, as opposed to when the news was out, which is usually the case. If you're patient, you usually get an opportunity. Next, we have Thor number 134, first appearance of the High Evolutionary. Supposedly an actor had been confirmed for Guardians 3 for this character, which caused a 6.0, caused lots of sales in this book. 6.0 hitting 650. We got this weird this average sale that Tom and them throw out. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense. That was 975. At this point, I gotta just assume for some of these older books, they're averaging across slabs and raws, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that seems to be what they're doing. That really doesn't tell you anything. But anyway, now a raw copy will cost you $75 to $400. 6.0s have backed up to $400 to $450. So just into the trap areas, it's just under a 40% drop. But yeah, so this one is definitely down. It's a good book, but when there's no buzz, it's definitely one to buy it. It's a nice Silver Age book here, but definitely turned into a trap if you were buying it based on that news that this character was probably going to show up in Guardians 3. And then last two books of this week are Star Wars related and related to the Boba Fett show. First up, we have Star Wars Darth Vader number 1 from 2015. This is the first appearance of Black Chrysanthemum, the Wookiee bounty hunter that showed up in Boba Fett. Back then, raw copies were going for $35, $50 based on his first appearance. 9.8 hit 300. And I said at the time it was an I'll be back because never buy when they first appear. Never buy when they first show up. That's when their things are most valuable. And I got absolutely crushed in the comments on Cash or Trash that week for saying that Black Chrysanthemum was not going to hold. Well, it's a $15 to $30 book now. 9.8, 80 to 175. There's been a couple sales down around the 100 to below the $100 mark for a 9.8. Yeah, the show's over. People aren't thinking about the character right now. This happens every time. Actually, I only said and I'll be back and I got crushed and it turned into a trap. So, yeah. But that's pretty typical for all of these shows, whether they be Marvel or Star Wars. And then last but not least on our list this week is Darth Vader number 3, first appearance of Dr. Aphra. People have been hoping to see Dr. Aphra for forever. This book has been on the list almost probably as many times as Ultimate Fallout 4. Hasn't quite sustained those kind of heights. But Chrysanthemum showed up. Those two are tied together quite a bit in the comics. So people thought we might get her. We didn't get her in the show. We still don't know when we're going to get her. I would guess it's when, not if. But back then, 9.8s were back up to $500. They'd been there. They dropped back. They were back to $500. Now raw copies will cost you $1 to $150, which is basically the same range they were then. Maybe it was $1 to $200, but 9.8s have dropped all the way down to $3 to $350. So this one turned into a bit of a trap based on that Black Chrysanthemum news, and definitely has backed up overall from some of the heights we've seen over the last few years on Dr. Aphra, which means maybe a better time to get into the book than it has been if you can find a deal on the lower end of these prices. So that is this week's list. We had 18 books, 13 down, only 2 up, 3 steadies. Yeah, it continues to be rough market out there if you're chasing hot books. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.